In relation to the second issue, cost of living, as you know, is a huge issue. Everywhere you go, as we move across the country, talking to a small business owner this morning, input costs around electricity continue to go up, and the government's renewables only policy means that power prices will keep going up. And the government has a 2035 target, but they don't want to tell Australians about it before the election. Why? If it's good for the country, why not provide the information about how much power bills will go up under the Albanese government if they're re-elected and they sign up to that target? So I just think the Prime Minister needs to provide that detail, and so far he's not done that, and Australians can expect their power prices to go up even further under a Prime Minister who promised a $275 cut to power prices, and instead they've gone up by $1,000. Happy to take any questions.
It seems that the AFP suggestion is that some of these people are doing this for money, not ideology. What's your view on that?
Well, Mark, again, I just think the Prime Minister needs to be honest here, because it seems that he's at odds with the Australian Federal Police Commissioner. If there has been such a significant international element, what has been the involvement of the federal agencies, including ASIO, and for how long? And why has the Prime Minister never mentioned this before now? When did the Prime Minister find out that there were foreign players? Are these state actors, or are they organised crime groups, or are they anti-Semitic groups? What did the Prime Minister know? And frankly, it just shines a spotlight on the fact that the Commonwealth Government should have deployed resources much earlier to what is a rolling series of terrorist incidents in our country. And to treat them as just an attack on a willful damage attack on a car, or as a graffiti event, it's not that. It's an attack on people because of their religious belief, because of their heritage. And I think the Prime Minister should provide what information he can publicly.
Mr Dutton, are you still backing mandatory sentences, given the evidence from the AFP Commissioner is that they might be paid actors?
Very strongly, we are of the view, and absolutely we will implement laws which say for somebody who commits a terrorist attack that there is a mandatory sentence. And I want this to be a very clear message of deterrence to those, whether they're acting on someone else's behalf, whether they're somebody who has hatred and racism in their motivation. I want them to know that there is a penalty to pay in Australia, and we're not going to allow these people to go before the courts to get a slap on the wrist. We don't have tolerance for hatred in our country, not against the Jews, not against Catholics, not against Asians, not against Protestants, not against atheists, not against tall people, short people, nobody. And the fact that the Prime Minister has allowed this issue to fester, and why? For political advantage. That's the most shameful part here. The Prime Minister has allowed this issue to continue to fester, and it has escalated to the point where we see a childcare centre and a synagogue, a place of worship, firebombed, and the Prime Minister has essentially absented himself from this process. It's completely unacceptable. Yeah.
And yet Australia's Islamophobia register has seen more than 1,000 reports since October 7. Is that helpful to social cohesion?
Which part of the amendment are you talking about? No, in terms of the targeting toward a particular segment of society, of course we're not doing that. The people we have in our sights are criminals and terrorists, and somebody who commits an offence of terrorism on our soil should know that there's a price to pay. It doesn't matter whether it's against a synagogue or against a mosque or against a church. These are places of worship, and they're sacrosanct. And you may disagree or agree with somebody's religious belief, or have no religious belief at all. But in our country, you're able to practice that belief according to your own values. You're able to bring your children up in accordance with those values. And we respect that, providing people are acting within the law. So they're not targeted toward anybody except somebody who is willing and able and has committed a terrorist offence. And that's what the Prime Minister should stand for as well. But unfortunately, at a time when our country needs national leadership during a national crisis, the Prime Minister is completely out of his depth.
Just follow up to that, Simone Abel from the Executive Council of Australian Jury yesterday said the opposition and the government need to join together.
Yes.
Will you heed those calls for a more bipartisan approach?
If that means doing nothing, like the Prime Minister is proposing, no, it's not something that we would agree to. If it means, as the Jewish leaders asked for yesterday, that there be a bipartisan position in relation to the proposals that we've put forward, then yes, I do want a bipartisan position. But I don't think the Prime Minister is going to arrive at that position. Why? Because I think he's hung a big part of the community out to dry, because you've got votes that they're chasing from inner city seats, from Greens and in Western Sydney. That's the Prime Minister's motivation here. It's why they've taken a position to oppose salmon farming in Tasmania, because they're chasing Green votes. And I think the modern Labor Party has forgot about the Australian worker, forgot about battling families, and forgotten about people who are living in regional and outer suburban areas. And the Liberal Party will always stand up for those people and fight on their behalf. And I don't think it's controversial, to be honest.
But do you acknowledge your role, Mr. Dutton, in bringing the temperature down?
Andrew, this is going to escalate to a point where somebody is going to lose their life. Let's be very clear about it. This is not somebody who has liked a nasty post online. We're talking about a childcare centre being firebombed. It is a terrorist attack. Okay, I think we should remind ourselves of that. Somebody breaks into the sports shed here on Saturday night and steals half a dozen beers, and they're 15 years of age. That is a criminal offence, and the police will treat that seriously. But it is not a terrorist attack. We're talking about a synagogue being firebombed. We're talking about people, and speak to people of Jewish faith who are worried because of their surname that they're going to be targeted. We've got Jewish kids who are going to school and sitting in classrooms with armed guards at the front gate. That's not happening in any other state school or private school system in our country. So let's resolve this and let's deal with anti-Semitism by letting every person know that we have zero tolerance for it. And the part of the problem that we've got ourselves into as a country has been because the Prime Minister absented himself from this debate early on for political motivations and outcomes. And I think that I can't recall an incident where an Australian Prime Minister, Labor or Liberal, has sacrificed one part of our society and their security to try and win votes in another part of the community.
Mr Dutton, police, according to the Prime Minister, have been investigating this from the very beginning. They just haven't been talking about it. The government says they've committed money towards this issue. What specifically could the government be doing to stop anti-Semitic attacks?
I wrote to the Prime Minister in November of 23 asking for a national cabinet to be convened, because the police commissioners and the police ministers and the premiers and chief ministers needed to hear from their Prime Minister about what the approach should be and what the Prime Minister believed should be the response. Now, the police have to act according to law, of course, but they will listen to the direction from the Prime Minister and from the premiers. And in Victoria, if you contrast Jacinta Allen's approach, which is disgraceful, to Chris Minns' approach, which has been much more effective, then I think there is a contrast there, and the Prime Minister's chosen the Jacinta Allen approach instead of the Chris Minns approach. And I think it was entirely foreseeable that we would see an escalation when you have, for months and months and months on university campuses, people chanting racist chants and attacking verbally and now their property as well, people of Jewish faith, and students and academics for months and months saw nothing from their Prime Minister. The Prime Minister got worked up when his electorate office was picketed, but before that we've just allowed every red line to be crossed. So what could we do? We could be doing a lot more, and we've proposed changes to the law which frankly should have been considered by the National Cabinet process, but instead this was a chicken flick exercise by a desperate Prime Minister who's out of his reach, looking to try and change the conversation.
Mr Dutton, when you say that the Prime Minister's allowed this to fester for a political advantage and then you nominate inner city seats in Western Sydney, there'll be voters in those seats who take great offence at that. Who are you talking about?
I'm talking about Green voters, Mark. I mean, this is what you talk to the Prime Minister and listen to him. He's in a seat where he's under attack from the Greens at a local, state and federal level. He's obsessed with Adam Bandt. You see it in the chamber. And their existential threat is from the Greens. It's why you see Tanya Plibersek proposing the nature-positive anti-mining bill for WA. They're willing to sacrifice votes to try and hold their seats. And that's exactly the play that the Prime Minister's making, and we've called him out for it. Now, it's inconvenient for him to hear it, but that's the fact. And I want to lead a country which is united. I want to lead a country which is safe. I want to bring downward pressure on inflation so that we can help families afford their mortgages again. I want an energy policy which brings downward prices on groceries. This government, I mean, the reason they're conducting themselves the way they are at the moment on this issue is because they don't have a clue what they're doing. And it's not just national security, their energy policy, their economic policies have all led to the cost of living crisis that families are experiencing at the moment.